The other thing we talk about is that dads come to our program with a lot of needs, but they also come with strengths. And so as I have a business background in addition to social work, and so I work with dads to develop what's called a SWOT. And those of you who run nonprofits and business, you understand strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And so when we talk to dads, we're assessing them across that spectrum of their need, but also what do you bring to the table? You know, we don't want it to be, oh, you're broken, what can we do to fix you? It's what do you bring that makes your child's life better as a result of you being a dad? And then build a plan for that. Let me just talk briefly then about some of the ways that we've used nurturing fathers. We started with several years ago, we were part of the state, Colorado State Responsible Fatherhood Grant, and we were able to provide, as part of that grant, the Nurturing Fathers curriculum, and that's how I actually first came to know Mark and his program, and the rest, they say, is history. That grant was actually focused on fathers with domestic violence. We served dads who had domestic violence issues, and that was what that particular curriculum was focused on. Then we continue to use that. That grant expired a couple of years ago, but we continue to use it for that core purpose. As we have grown our program and understand some of the other needs of fathers, there's a couple of other areas that we use the Nurturing Fathers class on as well. The first, well, it's not the first, it's the most recent example of how we've used the Nurturing Fathers program. And that's with what we call with the Strengthening Families concepts. Mark mentioned there are 6. When we got the grant, there were actually 5. They have developed the 6th one. So when you see the next page, and I've listed those protective factors, we're not working with the 6th one because the grantor said, well, we're going to use the 5 that were originally developed, and but the 6th, which is around nurturing, is really so incorporated with everything else that it just seems natural to have that be a piece of, even though we don't specifically to address that, it is certainly part of what we talk about. This was a demonstration grant from the Annie E. Casey Foundation. Started the work by talking to several places. There were 3 sites in Colorado, our county, El Paso County, Jefferson County, which is a suburb of Denver, and then Fremont County, which is sort of southwest of Colorado Springs. The grant was, as I say, a demonstration grant to talk about, through the ACF, how to build community capacity. How do we grow this concept of strengthening families and use the strengths of our community to then grow families and fathers and mothers and children. The grant itself is called PIECES, which stands for Partnership in Early Childhood Education and Services. And so our part of that puzzle was to say, we see a curriculum that is very helpful and beneficial in this process of building strengths in families, and it's called Nurturing Fathers. And so we proposed and were approved to provide, we're actually providing 2 classes. Unfortunately, we wanted to provide more, but the funding wasn't that great, relatively speaking, but we were able to provide 2 13-week courses of the Nurturing Fathers class. But what we did was we took these protective factors and incorporated those into the curriculum. We didn't change the curriculum. The curriculum still is there. The dads get the participant handbooks, all of that. We cover all of that information. But in addition to what we cover through Nurturing Fathers, we've incorporated these elements. So what we did was, and I'll pass these around as well, this is a synopsis of how we infused strengthening families into the Nurturing Fathers curriculum. So I'll just start those around. The key It wasn't that, as we got looking at it, it was like, I mean, intuitively, I said, this makes so much sense. But as we began to look at how to incorporate it, there was so much of what Mark has done over the years with that curriculum that it was really not that difficult for us to say, you know, when we start talking about these issues of how do we build parental resilience or social connections, the whole idea of the group interaction, the group process in the classes lends itself to that, you know, and how do we then provide them that support? You know, when do we tend to see families? We tend to see families when they're in crisis. We tend to see families in need. And so what are the supports that families need that we can assist them with? In Colorado, especially, one of the things about Colorado is, in El Paso County, is we have the highest divorce rate in the state of Colorado at 73%. People say, well, why is that? I said, well, you know, we have a lot of military in Colorado Springs, 3 military bases there, but I don't think that's necessarily the reason as much as we're a transient community. Most people who live there come there. They move there from someplace else. And when you do that, you leave the family that you have and all the support that entails. When I grew up in a fairly small town, but for me growing up was a matter of having extended family who I didn't even realize I had. I knew that when I did, on the way home from school, if I did anything, my family knew about it before I got home. Like, how did that happen? You know? And so that community was there to reach out and to support all of us we were really a big family. And so when people move, they tend to lose that. You know, even if you have a great family support system, if you're living 1,000 miles away from your family and something happens, it's tough to immediately turn to that family member and say, I need your help then. So, social and emotional competence of children, obviously the whole issue of developing empathy and a nurturing relationship with your child is just so closely connected to that I don't really need to go into that with too much depth. And then the knowledge of parenting and development, certainly the issue of child discipline and how that fits together. But I think knowledge of parenting from the sense of, I as a dad, if I can understand what it meant for me to be a son growing up, that gives me so much more awareness about what it means to be a father. And as knowing that, then I can know that the kind of dad I am when my child is this little is going to be different than when my child is this big. And I have to be able to flex myself in terms of how to understand and do those things. So that's how we've incorporated that into that particular curriculum.